Welcome back, Communication 212. Today we're talking Chapter 1, Know Your Audience. Now, there are a few key questions you want to ask when you're getting to know your audience. You want to ask, what does your audience want to know? And this will vary based on the content that you have. And also think about what medium they are going to use. How will they want to access this information? What is the best medium for you to use to work with them? Now, to discover the answers to those questions, we have to talk about something called audience segmentation. And audience segmentation includes the four main areas of demographics, geographics, psychographics, and behavioral information. Again, that's demographics, geographics, psychographics, and behavioral information. Now, this first section, demographics, these are the ones that you usually see when you're filling out a survey for somebody or a questionnaire. You usually have to include something about your age, your gender, your race or ethnicity, your education, and possibly your relationship status. It depends on the type of survey you're taking and the data they want to collect. Now, this demographic information will often help people to figure out the surveyors or the people they're doing the survey for. It'll help them to figure out who is accessing their content or which platform they will be most successful using. Now, geographics refers to your audience's location. It can also refer to the medium they're using to access that information. Um, but generally speaking, when we're talking about geographics, this is location. That could be local, so maybe whatever parish or county or city you're in, regional, even regional like Southeast versus Southwest, uh, United States. It could be national, like living in the US versus Mexico or Canada, or international. Now, if you look at this temperature graph from NOAA, you can see that they have everything in the United States, since this is a US based organization. And you can see that they broke everything down based on average temperature for each region. And this information, of course, would be important for people living in specific areas, especially if they're or if you're someone who's planning a trip maybe and you want to go to a specific area that's maybe different from your original one, like if you're from Louisiana and you want to go to Colorado, you might be up here in this section where it's like average temperature of 60 degrees when we're usually in the 90s. So that type of information can be very important, and it can also help you to figure out a story idea for your audience. Now, psychographics cover a variety of things, but generally speaking, you can break psychographics down into activities, attitudes, personality, and values. So, of course, activities could be things like sports. It could be that you like knitting or crocheting. Maybe you like baking, gardening, maybe you like four-wheeling or duck hunting or something. Attitudes often will include your attitude maybe about religion or about a maybe how much school spirit should people have. It could be something about your personality. If you're someone who likes to share a lot or volunteer or something, or maybe you're someone with particular values, again, that could be a kind of religion type of thing or a spirituality or something. Or if you have a strong family value, if you believe in, having multiple generations living in your house or something, that could be another type of value that is shown in psychographics. And then finally, we have behavioral. Now, behavioral can be broken down into a few different things, but generally, just like the name suggests, we're looking at behaviors. These are things that people do. For example, buying patterns. If you are loyal to a specific brand, like if you always go to Albertsons, even though there's a Rouse's down the street, that would be a type of behavioral brand loyalty. Or it could be that you maybe you value a good deal. And then in addition to this, maybe you are someone who is looking for a good deal, you enjoy eating pizza once a week, and there happens to be a Domino's close to your house. So we have some geography thrown in there too. And that means that maybe you're seeing a few more targeted advertisements for the Domino's 3 for $5 deal or whatever deal they have going on. So or excuse me, yeah, it's usually three pizzas that are $5 a piece, not $5 for three pizzas. That'd be crazy. But anyway, the point is that you are looking at different behaviors of people. So, are they people who are maybe loyal to Charmin toilet paper, or are they people who are totally fine buying Kirkland brand or Value Save or any of the other off-brand ones, as long as it's toilet paper and it's, two-ply and kind of soft? Another type of behavioral item that you might see is shared interests. And this is one where looking at what your target audience does can help you predict what they're going to do in the future. And you see this a lot when you get recommendations on streaming services. For example, on Hulu, if you finish a show like on here, they have Desperate Housewives. If you finish that show, then afterward it might tell you, oh, you might like Grey's Anatomy because, they're kind of same time period ish. And often people who watch this also say they like this other one. And you'll see that quite a bit on all of those recommendations, again, especially for this type of thing. You'll see it on shopping apps too. If you look at a particular pair of jeans or shoes, then you'll usually see a little bar at the bottom where it says, people who looked at this also looked at these other items. And they'll recommend some other things that you might be interested in because other people clicked on them. And if they clicked on the product that you're looking at right now. Now let's take a look at some audience segmentation at work. So, according to a Pew Research Center survey, 32% of Americans have a tattoo, including 22% who have more than one. And how did the authors group people in their study? Well, if we take a look at the study, we can see that they're saying tattoos have become a more common sight. And if we look at it, first things we see are things like gender, race and ethnicity, age, and also education and income, religion, sexual orientation. Now, these first few, if you look at them, which category do they belong in? If you said demographics, that's right. Things like age, race and ethnicity, gender, all of those are going to be demographic markers. Um, and education as well. Now, if we start getting into and sometimes education psychographics too, but income, religion, sexual orientation, those things are going to be more in the psychographic category. So again, demographics, we're looking at gender. 38% of women have at least one, compared with 27% of men. So there was a clear difference in, even though it's close, in the number of men versus women who have tattoos. And then they also broke it down by age and also race and ethnicity, like I said. So age-wise, they said 56% of women ages 18 to 29 and 53% 30 to 49 had tattoos. 39% of Black Americans have a tattoo, compared with 35% of Hispanic, 32% of white, and 14% of Asian Americans. Now, when they collect this type of data, they're trying to figure out where patterns are, if there are any patterns to be found. Of course, they did say adults under 50 are especially likely to have a tattoo, and a quarter of adults 50 to 64 and 13% of those 65 and older uh, had them. So you can see that, especially if you talk to people who are older, it was considered, especially in America, like to be a not as good thing to have a tattoo. So, generally speaking, older people are less likely because of that psychographic bit that comes into play along with their demographic differences. And of course, some other psychographic information. Certain religions are against having tattoos. Um, and they did notice a difference between people with different education levels as well. It said 37% of those with some college or less had a tattoo, compared with 24% of those with a bachelor's degree and 21% of those with a postgrad. Now, this doesn't mean that if you have a tattoo, you can't get one, like a postgraduate degree or anything. This is just their their findings in the report, and you can look at it and see how they collected their data and everything too. And they also found a difference between people with different incomes. And like I said, religion was a big one. 41% of religiously unaffiliated adults have at least one tattoo, compared with 29% of those who are affiliated with some religion. Um, And sexual orientation was another one. They found that it was, you know, more prominent in certain groups of people. Around half of lesbian, gay, or bisexual Americans have at least one tattoo. The share is especially high among women. 68% are tattooed, including 55% who have more than one. By comparison, 31% of straight Americans have at least one tattoo. So think about it. How would you classify the act of getting a tattoo? Would you say it's mostly demographic, geographic, psychographic, or behavioral? Or when you look at it, how do these different elements come into play to influence whether or not someone would possibly get a tattoo, or why they may or may not have one? Well, let's move on to foci. Now, foci are another way for you to help you find different topics for your audience. And these are factors related to lead and topic development, and they can be a big help for you, especially when you get stuck trying to figure out what kind of topic to cover. So, FOCII is an acronym. It stands for fame, oddity, conflict, immediacy, and impact. Again, that's fame, oddity, conflict, immediacy, and impact. Now, fame of course, means a person or a place or a thing with mass appeal and recognition. So, something that the average person, either in a particular region, like when we have local celebrities, for example, the meteorologist Rob Perillo would be an example of a local celebrity. Sharon Moss of Moss Motors is usually considered one in the Lafayette area too. There are lots of different examples of local or regional celebrities. We also have national and international level celebrities too. You have ones who are maybe influencers who are specific to a particular area. So maybe someone whose makeup tutorials are really well known, or someone who's really well known for showing people how to cook, like binging with Babish would be one, or they have this other person who would do like outdoor cooking things, and people would just sit and watch him next to this guy next to a campfire, like making food and stuff. Um, so fame doesn't necessarily have to be only national or international level fame. It can be someone who's famous within a particular genre, um, or maybe someone who's a business leader who's very well known in their particular circles. So, fame, and again, it can refer to a place. An example of a place version of this would be New York. Paris would be another one, or the Cathedral Notre Dame would be one. That would be a thing that is very well known. Another thing would be the painting Starry Night or the Mona Lisa, stuff like that. All of those are considered famous. So they would fall under the fame element. And that means that you're going to mention them to your audience right away. Now, oddity can refer to something new. It can also refer to something unusual. Now, when we talk about something new, it could be new and still be an annual item, kind of like all of the different flavors of Starbucks seasonal syrup things. The pumpkin spice latte, it's there every year, but people like it because it's a limited time only item. Same thing used to be for the McRib. People wanted it because it was limited time only. It was only a certain amount of time where you could get it, that kind of thing. Um, and you could also include something because it is unusual. One example might be focusing on lots of different types of spoons. I found a blog post where they talked about, I think, 100 different types of spoons. And one of them was this very odd looking fellow here, which is a bonbon spoon. And it's designed to hold your bonbon without having crumbs go in your mouth. So very unusual, and not something that you would probably ever encounter in real life, but it does exist. So, what's one unusual news story or social media story you saw recently? All right. Now that you've thought about that for a second, did it include any famous people in it too? Or was it focusing on something that was mainly, an odd event, or something that was maybe a new item, like a new clothing line or something like that that came out? Right. Let's move on to the next item. So we had the F, we have the O, and now we have the C, conflict. And conflict can arise in lots of different forms. When we talk about conflict, we could be talking about something as simple as sports teams. We could be talking about politics, political groups, political actions that there are always people for and against something. Um, and the more you look into political things, you'll find that there's always going to be someone who opposes a thing. So it's very easy to find. Um, you also might have some conflict in social organizations. Now, maybe this isn't conflict as in like the traditional sense of an us versus them type of conflict. Maybe it's the conflict of running out of money, and this group is fundraising so they can continue to exist and provide services. That would be a type of conflict. Or maybe they're going to lose their location and they need a new building. So whatever it is, there are lots of different types of conflicts. It can be even between individuals. Often, of course, if you're covering it and it's between individuals, it's probably with someone who is famous in some way, or they did something that made them famous. So it could be individuals, groups, whatever it is, there is some kind of pull between two groups or two possibilities that is happening, and that's going to be your conflict. Now, immediacy is definitely a big one in the news arena. Now, this is where we're talking about something that is relevant right now. And it is important to your audience because it is important right now. And it's something they need to know, especially if we're looking at stories that are developing in our 24-hour news cycle. And that means things like social media posts. You want them to be as relevant to now as possible, as well as our broadcast news. Uh, if you'll notice, they often try to include a lot of live stand ups. And so, where people are on location somewhere outside watching the snow melt, or they're doing whatever it is that they're covering, and that will often take precedence over any other stories, even if the other story is still important, but maybe it isn't as important because there isn't an immediate uh, update for your audience. And then finally, we want to look at impact. Now, this could be personal impact or it could be individual impact. Whatever it is, it's something where it you need to show your audience how it affects them. This could be something that includes topics like politics. Often you have to show people why something is important, especially when we're talking about a like a meeting agenda for a school board or for or a public meeting about a new bill that's coming up, or something else that's on a voting ballot, maybe, whatever it is, you need to show your audience how it impacts them, and you want to make sure there is an impact. And this is a good test to whenever you're deciding, do I want to cover, should I cover this national or international story? Well, how does it impact your intended audience? Is there an impact to them? Is it something they where they should be interested in it because there's a particular famous person, or is it something where we have an update to the story? How does this relate to my audience? All right, let's talk about audience needs. So there are three parts to our audience needs. And those are value, engagement, and action. So when we talk about meeting audience needs, we are looking for something of value. We're looking at something where they can engage with it, and you want to provide an action for them to do so they can take the next step with the information you gave them. So again, with value, we are looking at a personal level of impact. This is why, even though something could be a decent story about a person who is famous or something, it may not have enough personal impact to be good for your particular audience. So take that into consideration when you are deciding whether or not to cover a particular story. And that'll help you to avoid including unnecessary things in your reporting. And you also want to look at something that's engaging. So you want to engage your audience and help them to connect with material that they find interesting. And this is where some of those other foci elements come into play, where something odd might be interesting to them. And so you would want to engage your audience in that way. Um, but again, you also want to make sure when you are providing that information that you're developing it in a way that is helpful for your particular audience. And then finally, action. And this is where you are giving your audience the tools they need to take the next step. And this happens in pretty much all media where you need to give them some way to connect not only with the material, so you're giving them something they're interested in and of value and providing something it in an engaging way. You're also giving them the next step for what to do with that information you just gave them. And most of the time when we're looking at developing media writing, we need to provide some kind of next step for our audience, help them to connect with the material and move on um, to have that personal impact. So let's take a look at this press release and figure out what kind of audience needs we have. So, what audience segment seems to be their intended audience? And how does it fit the audience's needs of value, engagement, and action? So, we can see this is from the US Product Safety Commission, and they are warning people about these magnetic chess games that are hazardous. So we can tell that because we can read the title right here. But let's go ahead and open this press release and check out our options. So we can see this relates to a magnetic chess game sold by a company called Jomo. And the hazard they're highlighting is the loose hazardous magnets pose a risk of serious injury or death if ingested by children. And the consumer action. So right away, we have this great outline for the warning, and then they give us a press release with the additional details about how many magnets were eaten. And of course, this was usually by children. Um, and then, so of course, they're telling us this is the hazard. Here's a picture. Here's what it is. And instead of instead of keeping the magnet chess game and just not playing with it, they recommend getting rid of it. So take it away and dispose of them. So throw them in the garbage or take them to a recycling facility. Do not sell or give it away because they are hazardous. So, yeah, don't pawn it off on somebody. So they have very clear directions and they give the audience a very clear explanation of what's going on and why you should stop and why they're reporting this and where you can report any incidents involving injury or product defect. So we have multiple actions available to our audience here. And it seems like their intended audience is going to be families with young children, and they want people to be aware of this problem and, of course, to stop using the product and dispose of it. Well, that's it for getting to know your audience. Up next, we will talk about APA references. I'll see you then.